Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry, high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher X video. All right, we are back with checking out another video from Mr. Beat. And I know his fans were really anxious to get this video out. It's called The American Presidential Election of 2024. Now, Mr. Beat is basically an expert on presidents and elections, covering all of them now on his site and in his books, but I don't think I've ever reacted to one of them here on the channel. So with this very fresh, I thought now was a perfect time to do it. Okay, this original link is down below. Make sure you watch that. Go check that out first. Then come back and see what I have to say. By the way, make sure you checked out a couple of the episodes of History Showdown. It's my history trivia game show where Mr. Beat was on a couple of them. And that tournament is still ongoing. Stay tuned to the channel and you'll know when the next episode is coming up. All right, let's get started. All right, I got my America hat on and my, I guess, kind of America shirt on. It's a little ironic, but yeah.
Mr. Beat presents Presidential Elections in American History.
Epic rap battles of history. It's kind of our version of rap battles.
The 60th presidential election in American history took place on November 5th, 2024. Never before had so many Americans been so confidently wrong about so many things. This was...
Can I interject something for you guys? Because I do want a lot of feedback, and I'm going to give you maybe some questions and stuff to interact with too. What do you think about our whole voting day process? You know, it's on a Tuesday in November, and a lot of people are like, that's not very good. I mean, on a Tuesday means people are going to be at work, and people, it can be very hard, you know, to get off work, even though, you know, your employer is supposed to allow you some time to be able to do that. But you think it should be like a national holiday, for example? Should it be on a weekend? I know it's very different around different countries. So what do you guys think about our voting day?
Was the misinformation age, when facts no longer mattered, as it was so easy to find plenty of evidence that backed up your feelings. And the COVID-19 pandemic had only made all this worse. Just like the previous president, Donald Trump, Joe Biden was very unpopular and old. Yeah,
old as heck.
Really old. One of his first major accomplishments, withdrawing all remaining troops in Afghanistan, didn't go so well. By the end of his first year...
Yeah, that ends up being a major talking point for President Trump, was that the way the United States pulled out of that was damaging, basically enabling, I guess, the Taliban, who are going to come back into power regardless. But the fact that, you know, people, I guess, or supporters in the country sort of got left behind, or a lot of materials, a lot of like war materials were actually left behind. So I know that becomes a major point there. But the interesting thing he was mentioning about kind of the misinformation age, you know, I was thinking about this. It's interesting because we are more prone now to information as well as misinformation more than anybody ever has. And we're also getting to our generation, our, you know, like Gen Xers and stuff like that, and lower in age, have lived in their developmental years of being a human in the era of like social media. And one thing we know about social media is the content you're given is algorithm based. And so it allows itself to be just kind of cycled into your face. The democratization of information on the internet has made it basically that fact checking or doing any type of like peer review, I guess, in a way, is now no longer needed, and often seen as also problematic by some that think there's, you know, inherent problems with things like that it's censorship in a way. So it is an interesting thing that we've seen here.
Year in office, inflation, all remaining troops in Afghanistan, didn't go so well. By the end of his first year in office, inflation dramatically went up. The next year, prices continued to skyrocket. It was the worst inflation in more than 40 years. Not only that, things got chaotic at the southern border with Mexico as more undocumented immigrants entered the country, raising new concerns about border security and more bad stuff getting into the country. Heck,
sure. I'm sure he's going to talk more about the, you know, border issue, but was also talking about inflation, and the defense, I guess you would say, of that is, you know, coming into the whole COVID experience in 2020, had global inflation all over the place, right? It was massive. It was a global issue, and kind of the talking points have been for and against how that has gone in the last 4 years, where, okay, yes, inflation, very, very high, but again, global issue. But then also the fact that it had been going down by the time that the election took place, and it had stabilized, or at least been trending downward more than other countries, especially ones really impacted by COVID, which, I mean, I guess is everywhere in the world. But then also the fact that still doesn't mean that like it's not an issue or it's not an arguing point. It's still something very important to voters. Voters, usually vote with their wallet. It's the first thing that usually people can see and will identify as a political issue, regardless of the things that set things like prices and inflation, which is always very multifaceted. But interesting how that talking point was kind of used either in defense or in accusations.
The entire world got more chaotic after Russia invaded Ukraine and after Hamas and other Palestinian militants from the Gaza Strip attacked Israel, ultimately leading to the Gaza War. Many Americans criticized Biden for stirring things up further by pushing for aid to both Ukraine and Israel.
Brandon, you also told me, as you can hear the chants from the crowd.
You guys know that's where the "Let's Go Brandon" thing came from. They're talking about it, but it's actually kind of funny how it came about. Check this out. So that's what the crowd's saying, but then we'll see if they show the part of the clip where the reporter is interpreting it, and she does not hear that it's saying, F Joe Biden.
By pushing for aid to both Ukraine and Israel.
Brandon, you also told me, as
the guy's named Brandon,
from the crowd. Let's go, Brandon.
Yeah, as it turns out, they were not saying, let's go, Brandon, but that became a not so sneaky way of expressing hate.
That is such a funny thing because I don't know if it's going to go down in history as one of these funny like campaign slogans. It is going to be one of those things that's going to need explanation, and people are probably going to forget within the next generation when you hear about "Let's Go Brandon" or one of these flags ends up showing up at swap meets or thrift stores and be like, "Let's go Brandon." What was that about again? It's like, I remember it has something to do with Joe Biden, but like, what did it have to do with it? I think it's actually a funny story.
Of Joe Biden. Soon the meme was everywhere, but some Biden supporters eventually co-opted it to praise him. The meme "Dark Brandon" specifically praised
just
Biden
doubling down.
when he apparently went even further to the left politically. Speaking of which, Biden arguably pushed the country further left more so than any president since Richard Nixon by passing important laws like the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Respect for Marriage Act.
Now, the thing is, pushing like the presidency to the left it doesn't take much really of pushing to the left of how actually vast the right and left platforms can be, that it doesn't really change that much. You know what I mean? But like relatively, yeah, it can seem like that,
The Biden administration went after Big Pharma to lower prescription drug costs and went after big tech monopolies. Heck, he even became the first president to join workers on strike.
United Auto Workers Union.
While the economy overall was strong, extreme wealth inequality.
That's one thing I've heard. I guess people would criticize, but being a more pro-union president, which again can, is that saying much? But one of the more pro-union presidents probably had, at least since the progressive era.
Had only gotten worse, with just a small number of billionaires increasingly using their power to influence politics. So yeah, Biden was old and unpopular, but it's all good because his main political opponent was almost as old and unpopular as he was. Uh-oh, we got a rematch. Guess who's back? Donald's back. Donald Trump remained an extremely controversial figure in American politics, and he now faced not one, not two, not three, but 4 criminal indictments. New York charged Trump for faking his business records in order to hide hush money paid to an adult film actress named Stormy Daniels to cover up an alleged affair he had with her. A jury found him guilty, making him the first American president to ever become a convicted felon. Next, the federal government charged Trump.
Now, it is also interesting because the fact that these trials took place and there are these charges really did nothing to destroy or to hurt his fan base. In fact, people ended up kind of doubling down on it and saying that it was actually it's really just proof of weaponization of the justice system. That's been a big topping point, but it didn't hurt him at all, which brings in an interesting thing about kind of like presidential scandals or anything. Do you think like scandals are not going to be as impactful as maybe they have been in history? Like something like Watergate. If something like Watergate had happened now, would that have any effect? Like actually lead to like, the resigning of a president? Or is it, maybe it is the technology age, and the further I think it seems go in history or go into the future, and the more we have access to all types of different media, in a way that, you could basically post whatever you want. Is that basically now just it's going to be able to be either refuted, or there's going to be just popular talking points and easier to rebut, any type of scandal? So do you think scandals are going to have as big of an impact in the future anymore? Let me know.
With stealing classified documents after he left office. Here's a famous photo of some of them sitting in his bathroom. The United States charged Trump with breaking the Espionage Act, making false statements, and obstructing justice. Oh, but the feds weren't done yet. They then charged Trump with attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. And finally, Georgia charged Trump with organizing a conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election in the state. Whew, did I get it all?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, again, you had these things pile up, but of course it had no impact, right? It had no impact. And again, even emboldened a lot of people to kind of reinforce things that people had already been talking about, these terms like deep state and, again, like the swamp. It kind of almost enabled more of a defense of it. So interesting how that has. And I just wonder, again, if that kind of thing is going to, continue and be just the norm.
By facing dozens of felonies and decades of potential prison time, Trump decided to run for president a fourth time. Critics of Trump said he seemed
a lot of people didn't know that he ran before 2016, a decade before that. Did not even come close, obviously, to cracking really the Republican Party. But yeah, fourth time. Now, I don't know if Mr. Pete's going to get to it, but he's also going to be the only president that will serve a second term and not consecutively. Grover Cleveland's the only one to do that. All other presidents that did 2 terms did do it consecutively. And it kind of makes me wonder too. And you guys think about this. Do you think it actually has helped Trump to be, rather than be reelected in 2020? Do you think he's going to have a more impactful, or, did it make him more electable almost in 2024 when you had all of the things that went on between 2020 and 24, COVID, however you want to, look at that. And then just the wars that went on with Israel and Gaza and Russia and Ukraine. Do you think it's actually helped him to have a postponed second term?
Be running for 3 main reasons: to keep his fortune, to stay out of prison, and to get revenge on his enemies. Due to Trump's involvement with the January 6th Capitol attack, many states tried to get him off the ballot. However, the Supreme Court ruled this unconstitutional in the case Trump v. Anderson. Trump's fans remained astoundingly loyal to him, viewing any accusation against Trump as more evidence that anyone they didn't like was out to get him.
You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
Don't worry, he was just joking, I think. Although many Americans...
Now, you guys know, especially if you follow Mr. Beat on media, he's definitely not a fan, of Trump, and maybe you get that tone in some way. So understanding a little bit about kind of his background and how he's trying to use, historical precedent to talk about these things. But, you can see that coming through in this as well, because again, it comes back to that thing where like the same accusations can also be used as points of defense and can be used as like positive points if you have the means, the charisma to be able to do that. And again, I think in this modern age where not just presidential, candidates, but like anybody can basically bypass the media for the most part and hook up directly to a base of people. You can do that again through like social media. And that's President Trump is really kind of the first one to be able to do that, where you can survive without the media.
Americans didn't
Wasn't
think
always
he
like that.
was. They, legit thought he wanted to be a dictator and get rid of the Constitution. Trump once again campaigned on border security while also calling for massive deportations of undocumented immigrants and even legal immigrants. He also called for higher tariffs and bringing back the spoils system to reward loyalists with government jobs.
You know, one thing you can't say, especially about the second term as opposed to the first term, there were a lot of these kind of things that he was talking about, you know, it was like the wall and migration issues and other things that he had brought up that never came to play in 2016, right? In that first presidency. But it's pretty incredible how many of those things now have been enacted on, and we'll see if they actually go through, because some stuff's going to get held up in court with all the executive orders that have come out immediately in these first few weeks of the election. You definitely see, I think, in this one, like, maybe it's the fact that he knows this will be the last term and you have 4 years, which may seem like a lot, but it's really not, that they're going to spearhead this stuff very, very quickly. And maybe the point was you couldn't go through it, so much of it through the traditional process that we use with, you know, the legislative branch and things, and just trying to use the executive power as much as is legally possible to get those things done. Try to find, I don't know if it's loopholes again, or just find some way.
Because both Trump and Biden were weak candidates, they both faced opponents within their own political party when trying to get renominated. Two notable folks who challenged Biden for the nomination were
debatable
Dean
to say they're
Phillips,
weak, I guess.
a U.S.
Especially
representative
Trump.
from Minnesota, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the son of Robert F. Kennedy, whose own presidential campaign was cut short in 1968 after he was assassinated. Like his father, RFK Jr. generally leaned to the left politically, but had controversial views on vaccines and public health.
Yeah, so he was, you know, divisive in that way, that he had a pretty interesting wide base of support, talking RFK Jr. here, about a lot of things he might say are very much like conservatives will be very much into, especially like the medical stuff, especially in response also to COVID. But then maybe some of these other social issues that might lean to people maybe a little more liberal in the sense that we use it today. It almost like was too wide of a base to actually get real full political support, because you might be one of those people that's like really, really into something he's saying, but then really against the other things. And now, of course, what we've seen is he is now going to be joining, the executive branch with Trump as health department.
Politically, but had controversial views on vaccines and public health. On the Republican side, Trump's biggest two opponents were Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and Nikki Haley, who served as ambassador to the United Nations during Trump's first term.
I'd almost say in the end, Haley and Chris Christie were, unless I'm thinking of someone else, it's now been a while since the debates, but were the only ones that really kind of came out like against him within the party. You have like Vivek Ramaswamy, then you have like DeSantis, who were, you know, really didn't want to like bring him down during the election, whether that was because they really supported him or they're hoping that they could be placed into, you know, a position of power in the government, because that has been a common thing, you know, so far with the second Trump run here. But yeah, the party was really behind, overall, relatively speaking, behind Trump, even though he was not the incumbent. But again, a lot of people kind of felt he was kind of the incumbent just because, you know, he had only been in one term.
Meh, they didn't stand much of a chance.
Yeah.
Trump was as popular as ever. He chose J.D. Vance, a U.S. Senator
I don't think
from
anyone
Ohio,
had a chance in the
as his
primary.
running mate. After Biden became the presumptive nominee for the Democrats, RFK Jr. carried on his campaign as an independent with Nicole Shanahan, a wealthy philanthropist
What's going on with
from
her
California, as his running mate. RFK Jr. attracted a passionate following, consistently polling between 8 and 10%. It was a unique coalition featuring both former Democrats and former Republicans who all generally didn't trust the government. However,
it was such a wide base, but didn't fill any vacuums in a way that exists to get, especially an independent candidate in there. You know what I mean?
By the summer of 2024, RFK Jr.'s campaign had lost momentum. That summer began with the first major debate between Biden and Trump.
Man.
Biden notably struggled during it, trailing off at times, giving confusing answers, and saying things like,
"I finally beat Medicare."
"Oh, yeah."
This debate, I do think, is going to go down in history as one of the most consequential debates. We'll see if it gets talked about in 100 years, like the Lincoln-Douglas debates or maybe the Nixon JFK debates, but it is something that completely destroyed his candidacy enough that it was very late because it was in the summer, right before, the election in November. And that threw such a massive wrench into the Democratic Party, as it was, again, so late into the process that there was never a primary, right? The Democrats did. They basically just kind of pushed Kamala through. Which, again, may or may not have been the best candidate choice. We know that she did not do very well in 2020 when she was running, and, definitely got put onto a pedestal being able to be the vice president, right? That was able to leap a lot of other potential candidates. So, but yeah, this was the end. This was the end of his chances. And their own party, heads pretty much forced him out, even though to the end he said he thinks he still could have won the election, but he's like, I want to try to keep peace in the party and that kind of thing. It is interesting because we don't know exactly how it would have gone. I think a lot of people, and myself included, thought that the Democrats probably had maybe a little bit more of a chance with Kamala, kind of taken over, but I don't know if that would be enough. I thought it would maybe help just to have a different face there. But we'll see if he gets into the campaign. I, for one, thought that Harris's campaign was actually not very good. It wasn't very helpful. It didn't. She had, I think, so many things inherited just to be able to be a younger face. But then the actual campaigning and stuff did not win people over.
Yeah, his debate performance didn't convince many voters that he could handle the most difficult job in the world for 4 more years. After this, many Democrats called for Biden to drop out of the race, in 4 years? And to the shock of many Americans, he did just that. On July 21st, just 107 days before the election, he announced on social media that he was withdrawing his bid for re-election and endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris, to be president.
For you all that were really supporting the Democratic Party, what do you think about Biden's approach to the end of this? Was it fair for him to, go on? Because he did believe that he was the person for the job. But do you think if maybe he had a year before, let's say a year, maybe not even a year before that, maybe 6 months before this, let's say you could do it in 9 to 12 months before the election. Do you think that would have changed the outcome very much? Or was this going to be one of those elections that do happen a lot, where anybody that comes out of that party is going to be someone that loses? It doesn't even matter. And then on the other side too, it's does it really matter who you put up in the Republican Party? You know what I mean? But for the Democratic Party, do you think a full campaign process, an open primary would have changed things? I am not so sure, but I think it would have been better and better. But I mean by better is maybe a little bit closer and had potentially more success for the Democrats if that happened. Now, would it change again the final election? I'm not so sure.
For Biden, it was Jover. A week before that, a man from the roof of a nearby building fired multiple shots of bullets at Donald Trump as he spoke at a rally near Butler, Pennsylvania. Trump survived the assassination attempt, though one of the bullets hit his right ear. The bullets killed one audience member and critically injured 2 others. The dramatic event ended up making Trump look heroic. I mean, look at that photograph.
Man, that's going down as one of the most iconic photos. How many people on social media have adopted that as their profile pictures now? I saw that instantly, on shirts. I swear I went out of town. I went on vacation at one of those touristy gift shops. I think it was a week. They were already selling shirts of this.
Look at that photograph. It was immediately iconic. It was the most serious attempt to kill a president or presidential candidate since the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan in 1981.
I was one when that happened. I don't post political stuff very much at all. But I remember I actually tweeted, thought saying that this was definitely going to help his election campaign. It'll embolden him, maybe create sympathy in some way. But in the end, I was kind of surprised how quickly people weren't really talking about it that much. Do you guys agree that for something that big of a deal, it kind of got swept away pretty quick?
September 15th, another man tried to assassinate Trump while he golfed in Florida. By that time, RFK Jr. had suspended his campaign to endorse Trump. Whoa, this arguably gave a boost to Trump's campaign. Meanwhile, Democrats all pretty much went along with Kamala Harris as the next logical choice to run for president now that Biden had dropped out. She chose Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, as her running mate.
I don't think that was a bad choice. But I also don't think people vote based on who the vice president is. I mean, I think it maybe can hurt you, but I don't think it can help you. What do you guys think about that? The role of the vice president in elections. Now we'll see what Tim Walz does. Is he said anything? I mean, I'm recording this. It's February. It's been the inauguration's only been a year away or a month away. Any indications that he might run for president?
The Harris-Walz ticket breathed new life into the Democratic Party. At the only debate between Harris and Trump, Harris performed much better than Biden. Now it was Trump who was rambling and giving confusing answers, saying stuff like,
"They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating.
Oh man,
they're eating the pets."
Despite a weaker debate performance, Trump continued to be a marketing genius with notable publicity stunts to troll Kamala Harris.
This is such the strength of President Trump. He loves campaigning. I mean, I feel a lot of other politicians, they do it because you have to do it. You got to put on the face, but he truly loves it, and he's a master of it. He went everywhere. He went and did everything. Now it's obviously a lot easier to do when you're not the president. You are full-time campaigning, but going on all those podcasts and it's going on Twitch streams and he went to the Libertarian National Convention, and even though he was treated terribly there, he was ruthlessly booed and stuff. He went everywhere to all different types of things, and he loves that. And we know how important that is, campaigning and just getting your face out there, especially if you're good at it and you love it. And he's that guy.
Trump also gave more long-form unscripted interviews on non-traditional media, on podcasts and YouTube videos. You've heard of YouTube, haven't you? Not only that, Trump also had the...
Now, I do think Harris did not help herself much by not doing a lot of those things because, on a lot of those podcasts like Rogan, I'm sure Theo Vaughn or something said it too, but, they were very much we would hope to get both candidates on. Of course, that'd be great when you're interviewer because you're going to get such an incredible amount of views, but not making that presence in what is now in the 2020s such an important thing to connect to people because it connects to people that aren't really into politics. It's one thing to go and get interviewed on CNN or Fox, but go and get interviewed on formats by people that aren't into politics, like some of these types of these podcasters and things. So you're hitting a different base than we have before. And with this type of media, the mainstream cable television media, it's dying. The new generation does not get into that. And they consume their media in other formats. And Trump was, I think, the first president to realize that. And it was huge for him to hit new demographics.
Richest man in the world now on his side, Elon Musk, who spent hundreds of millions of dollars and used Twitter, which he now owned, to help Trump win. This was the first presidential election in which artificial intelligence, or AI, played a significant role in the campaigns. So many AI-generated images made the rounds on social media.
Okay, this is the new problem that everyone is having right now. It is very, very clear that people are not media literate. Okay, it's just not, it's something that has gone so fast that it never became a part of how we learn how to interpret information from when we're young to when we're older. How many times do you see famous people, even politicians, presidents, Musk, all these guys that will put out images that are fake. They're either fake or they're out of context, they're out of time periods, they're anachronistic, and it becomes harmful because our ability to consume media is not even close to our ability to actually interpret media and to understand all the different things that go into it and the potential misinformation that can come out of that.
Fooling many people. In the final days of her campaign, Kamala Harris seemed to be reaching out more to former Republicans and abandoning more left-leaning Democrats who were not happy with Biden's position on the Gaza war.
This, in my opinion, was the thing that doomed her. She reached to the right rather than reach to the left. And what we ended up seeing with the voting election is those people that were not reached to the left didn't come out and vote. They did not see a reason to. I think in this election, you probably had more. I think most people that actively vote will do the voting for the lesser evil thing. But it seems like in this last election, there were more people that were like, you have to earn my vote. And they didn't come out. And you saw that with the voting turnout. It was lower than the last election for both candidates, by the way.
He remains cautiously hopeful that she could be the first female president.
But we are not going back.
That was such a failure of a campaign slogan because it's the exact opposite of what other people wanted. Like so many people wanted to go back. To them, it was like pre-COVID. And people align that with, President Trump, who's the last kind of president it's the last year it was of his presidency was during COVID, but it was such a failure of a message because it didn't mean anything. It was like, we're not going back, but never really explained not going back to what. And there wasn't a clear answer that I think that rallied people.
We are not going back. Not going back. We're not.
It's like, again, you have literally the other message was make America great again, which is essentially saying, let's go back. So it doesn't reach sides. It doesn't reach aisles. It doesn't do anything to undecided voters or, people that want to vote or not. All right, the results.
And here are the results. Oh, we went back all right. Donald Trump won, becoming the 47th president in American history. Trump received 312 electoral votes and 49.8% of the popular vote. Harris got 226 electoral votes and 48.3% of the popular vote. Trump.
If you hung out with me during, we did an all-night election thing, and actually Mr. Beat was one of the guests. We had a bunch of YouTubers coming throughout the night to talk about the election as stuff was unfolding, and I was one that thought that Trump was going to win, but I thought it would be quite narrow, especially with the Electoral College, and it was bigger than definitely I thought, both electorally and with the popular vote. I know Mr. Beat, he thought that Harris would win. But yeah, I kind of did think he was win, but not by the margin that he did. The swing states, he'll probably talk about that. They basically all went for Trump, which usually it can be a little bit more balanced in that case. But yeah, that did not happen.
Trump became only the second president in American history to be elected to 2 non-consecutive terms in office. The other being Grover Cleveland.
From
Don't
Sesame
you remember,
Street.
punk? J.D. Vance became the 50th vice president in American history. And this is very important. He became the first vice president with facial hair since Charles Curtis, who left office nearly 100 years prior. Trump.
That's amazing. Just because, mustaches have always been more common than just like full beards. So, yep, having them. By the way, what do you guys think being the vice president for Trump will do for J.D. Vance if he wants to become president? Is it just going to come down to one of those things that in 4 years' time, if people really like how things going, that he's going to be the shoo-in? Or could he almost already set himself up for being that candidate? Obviously, time will tell. But yeah, what do you guys think of him? Because again, he wasn't one of those guys that was in the primaries, right, running against him. A lot of people had no idea who he was until he gets the nomination nod. And if I remember right, wasn't his one of Trump's sons pretty influential on that I think knew him or knew more about J.D. Vance and kind of told, Donald that he'd be a good candidate. If I remember right, that was it. But anyway, kind of, leapfrogging the other Republican candidates. We'll see.
Trump became the oldest president ever elected in American history as soon as he was sworn in, breaking the record set just 4 years prior. So, yeah, Trump didn't go to prison. He went back to the White House. And despite his flaws, it was still worth it for many Americans to give him another chance. At the very least, this was another chance to stick it to the establishment. Populism was back, man.
60.9% of the population.
I'll see you for the next president.
63%. It's not a lot. When people talk about like how most people, like voted for a candidate, that's never the case in history. We'll see that like, most of the people like this candidate or this party. That's actually not the case because again, generally it's not very much over 50% that actually vote. So almost every election is actually only voted by a minority of people.
Presidential election, buddy.
Cool. All right, final thoughts. All right, so I had a pretty good rundown from Mr. Beat, hitting a lot of the points and a lot of stuff that went on. It was pretty tumultuous, 4 years of not just, the presidency, but all the strange events and things that happen with the campaign and trying to predict who's going to win and political alliances like changing and these new figures coming in. It was quite an interesting campaign. One of the most, I don't know if I want to call it entertaining, but maybe it is that we've ever had there. So anyway, I think I said most of what I wanted to say about my thoughts about the election and kind of what I thought was going to happen and whatever, but feel free to share down below. Be nice to each other. And again, we'll see y'all next time. Bye.